Welcome back to Eat This Girl podcast. We're so excited that you've joined us. This week is going to look a little bit different. This week is going to kind of revolve around Lizzy's testimony, which I'm so excited about. So get cozy, grab a nice little drink, and we will see you back in just a couple seconds. Welcome again to Eat This Girl podcast. We're excited that you've joined us. I'm so excited to be able just to hear the fullness of your testimony. I've heard a lot of it, but I'm excited to ask some questions and really dig down deep. But before we do that, I have a little fun question for you. Just to get us started. So the question is, what did employment look like for you, like through high school and college before you officially started your career?
So I started working when I was like 8, which sounds really bad, but it was a family business. My grandparents have a horseback riding stable, and so I grew up working there and, just, doing all the things that it takes to run a farm and a riding stable. And so I started there when I was 8, just doing like little odd jobs around the barn. My brother and I would make 10 cents for every pile of manure that we scooped.
Oh my gosh. That's funny.
I remember my first payday was $2. And I was so excited. I ran home. I was like, "Mom, look, I made $2." And this was in 2008, 2009,
school, yeah.
and I was in
elementary
school.
school. That's so funny.
And $2. My mom told me I had to tithe. Mm-hmm. From that $2.
20 cents.
I tithed 20 cents,
nice.
And I've been tithing ever since. So thank you, Mother.
She taught you good.
So that was my first job, and I did that. So I started when I was 8. I started guiding trails by myself when I was about 12.
Yeah.
Which, looking back now, I'm like, oh my gosh, I was 12 years old taking all these people out into the middle of the woods on horses by myself, which is wild.
Isn't that crazy?
And then I worked that all the way until the summer before I got married and started my first big girl job. So I did that every single summer and almost every weekend through school.
Wow. That's a big commitment. Family businesses are always, I feel like, a bigger commitment than just going out and getting kind of like an after school 4 days a week job.
Yeah, so that was 14 years, I think, that I did that. 12 to 14 years, something like that. There was one summer I couldn't because I tore my ACL, and I was on crutches and couldn't do anything, and I was low-key depressed all summer.
I was like, that kind of sounds awful.
And I sat at home and I babysat Demi, my little cousin, she was 2 or 3 at the time.
What a baby.
Yeah, she's just a
cute little Demi.
Cutie. And now she's 10. She's almost 11.
That's weird.
I know. So that was my primary job. And then I had a few other ins and outs. I did a lot of babysitting, especially for my family. And in high school, I worked at Cookout,
nice.
Which, if you're not from the North Carolina area, you might not know what that is, but it's a fast food chain that's really popular around here.
40 plus flavors of milkshakes.
It is...
It's
quite
something
impressive.
It's something else.
And so I worked there for a little while in high school, probably the worst job I've ever had. It just was not a great environment. Any restaurant really usually doesn't have a great environment.
Right.
So those are the 2 main jobs that I had in high school. I probably had some little ins and outs here and there as well. And then in college, I, again, was working at the barn. And then also I was kind of the barn manager at that point for my grandma, so I helped her with a lot of the financial books and record keeping and all of that as well. I learned so many skills from working there. I'm truly so thankful. There's so many things that I know how to do now, or that I'm able to handle now, that I credit to that job.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And then also in college, I worked at an Italian restaurant called Brio. I was a hostess there for a little while. I had this little job sitting with a sweet, sweet elderly woman who had dementia.
Did you really?
Yes.
Lizzy, I didn't know that.
So
oh my gosh.
she lived with her daughter, and her daughter worked with my aunt. So that's how I got the job. She had dementia, and it was, developing more and more. And so she needed to not be left alone all day, every day. So I would finish with my college classes, and then I'd go over there and sit with her for like maybe 4 hours or so each day. And we would just sit, and I would like make her sliced apples or PB&Js, and I would have to like make her eat because that was one of the things that she just
forget that you need to eat. Yeah.
And we would sit and watch either HGTV or the Game Show Network. And sometimes I would do homework and stuff. I would take her to like her appointments. Like I took her to get her hair done, or I'd take her to a doctor's appointment or whatever. And then
you selfless woman, you.
I know.
Good Samaritan. I'm like, whoa.
We'd do that. So cool. And then usually if I had to take her somewhere, she would want to get Wendy's after. So we'd go through the drive-thru of Wendy's, and she would pay for my food and stuff. And it was sweetie. So I did that.
Is she still alive?
I actually don't know. I need to ask my aunt because I don't know, but she was a sweet, sweet old woman.
I wonder if you went to her now, she'd remember you.
Probably not, just
Sounds
because
like you spent a lot of
the
time.
dementia.
Yeah.
I did that for maybe, I'm trying to think, maybe 3 or 4 months. Yeah, it was
That's
fun.
sweet.
I think I had some other little odd jobs here and there that I can't really remember, but those were probably the big ones. How
Stuff
about
like
you?
that makes me sad.
Oh, and then I was a teacher.
Right.
For like a year.
I forgot about
which
that.
is what I went to school for before I got my job here at the church.
Yeah.
So.
Man, that's so cool. Sounds like you had a lot of good like life experience. And I've heard of a lot of people, if they grow up in a family business, they end up resenting it.
Yeah.
So I think it's really special that you actually have taken so many good things from it, and you wouldn't have wanted it any other way.
There are definitely like lots of hard things.
I mean,
you
yeah,
know?
but ultimately it didn't wreck your relationship with your family. And
if anything, it brought us closer. Like I think some of my
Yeah.
favorite memories with my siblings and cousins are summers when we were working there together.
Yeah.
So
I love that for you.
Yeah.
Fun. My experience was, so I got my first job, I think, when I was 15 and a half, which in North Carolina you can get, most people don't start working until they're 16.
You can get like a worker's permit.
You can get a worker's permit. I feel like I did that. I was either 15 and a half or 16.
Yeah.
I got my first job at a local Italian restaurant. As a hostess, it was a great experience. Very tough at times. Like you said, the restaurant industry can be a pretty toxic place. But I had a really great manager that I had a lot of fun with. So ultimately, I think the experience was super awesome. And then after that, I'm trying to think. I had like 4 different jobs, but I'm trying to remember the order that they went in. I don't remember. Okay, so I had the hostess job at the Italian restaurant, and then I kind of stayed in the restaurant industry and hosted. I know I'm a hostess because I'm a woman, but I think it's still just hosted. I hosted at another restaurant briefly, like over a summer. That wasn't great. That's why it only lasted a summer. So left that one really quick. And then my third restaurant job was at a local seafood restaurant. And that was my favorite.
Wait, you worked at Captain's Bay?
Captain's Bay.
Oh
my gosh. I did. For a long time.
I wonder I remember going there one time with my mom after we went to the dentist. I wonder if you were working there when I was there.
I don't know, but definitely weird, like working in a seafood restaurant. It was definitely, I don't know. I'm not going to say anything.
And also, please note, we live in the mountains.
We live in the mountains.
We're a good 10 hours from the sea.
Right. I don't know. The part that I really loved about that job was learning to waitress because you got to interact more with, the customers. There are also cons to that because some customers can be super rude and not to mention inappropriate with female waitresses. But I really liked getting to know all the regulars. The staff was so much fun. It was family owned, so I got to know like everybody in the family, and they just really welcomed me in, and we had such a good time together. We would just laugh, and yeah. So restaurant industry, you know, it has its pros and cons. I generally had mostly a good experience. And then before I went to college, I worked retail for probably about, I don't know, 6 months to a year. And that was also a really good experience. I had a great boss. So learned lots of valuable things, lots of lessons about customer service for sure. That would probably be my main takeaway from both of those types of jobs. And then all through college, I did a work study program at my university. So I was in the religion department and had a work study job in the religion department. So I would like file things. I would just basically do anything that the professors needed. I would, you know, sometimes grade papers, grade tests, work on filing, all kinds of stuff really. And that was super fun because it was a small university, and so I already was able to make personal relationships with my professors, but having a work study job in that department just made me even closer with them, which I thought was really awesome.
Yeah.
And, you know, helped to deepen some other, you know, relationships with my peers. So I really loved that. So yeah, that was kind of my high school and college work experience. And then immediately after college, I got hired at the church and started my big girl career. So smooth sailing.
I love that.
It's been good.
So many little odd jobs
I know.
we do.
Yeah. I did do a couple babysitting jobs too, but those were very brief. They were great. They were just brief. So
yeah.
Sweetie. Love it. Cool.
Yay.
Well, let's jump into the nitty gritty, shall we? Are you excited?
Nervous.
You're a little nervous? Yes, because it's so personal.
Yes.
You know, these questions are about our lives.
Yeah.
And our experiences with God. And that can be very personal and vulnerable.
Yeah.
But we're just called to testify, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's what we're doing today.
That's what we're
talking about how God has worked in our lives. So
yeah, because really, I mean, everything that he's done in us and through us has led us to this point of doing this podcast and all of that. And so I feel like it's important that we share that. One, just because like we're called to testify. Like Peter tells us in the Bible to always be ready to tell people why you have the hope that you do.
That's so good.
I can't remember where that is, but it's one of my favorite verses because it's just like, you should always know why.
I love Paul.
It was Peter, actually.
Sorry, I love Peter too. I thought you were talking about Paul, and I was like, just another reason to love him.
That was Peter.
Peter.
It was in fact Peter.
Simon Peter.
Yeah.
Heart. Love him.
Yeah. So, yeah, we decided to do this here on a couch. Just make it a little more cozy.
Yeah.
Because, you know, we don't need a table because we're not studying today, so.
Yep. All right, let's jump in. So I have 5 questions for you.
All right. I do have a few little notes.
That's fine. Next episode, Lizzy will be asking me the same questions, and I have also typed out my notes, and it's lots of information. So feel free to, you know, use that.
Yeah, I will.
If you need to. Okay, ready?
Yeah.
All right, question number 1.
Wait, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Can we pray first?
Yeah.
Just feel like it would be good to
100%.
just pray first.
You want me to pray?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, dear Heavenly Father, we just thank you for this day. We thank you for just our friendship and our relationship and how you've worked to grow us individually and also together. We thank you for this opportunity to film this podcast, and we just pray over Eat the Scroll and that you would use it for your glory, that the people on the other side that are watching feels a sense of your love and feels a sense of community. I just pray for Lizzy right now in this moment, that you would calm all nerves and anxiety, that Holy Spirit, you would just come upon her and speak through her and say whatever you need to say. we just pray that you empower us in these moments to speak truthfully about our experiences with you, and just give you glory for every single second of it, the good moments and the really hard and scary moments that we've experienced with you. We just thank you for both of those, Lord, and we just love you so much. We invite you into this space. We just praise your name. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thanks.
You're welcome.
All right, now let's get into it.
Now let's get into it. I'm glad you brought that up. That was very mature of you.
Thank you.
To pray before we start.
Thank you so much.
Okay, question number 1 is about your conversion. So, how did you come to faith in Jesus as Lord and Savior?
So, I actually do not remember a time when I didn't know him. My parents were pastors. I grew up in church, and I truly cannot tell you the moment when I got saved.
Yeah.
Which like growing up, I would always be like, oh my gosh, am I really saved? And so every time a pastor would do a call to salvation and I would lead the church in a prayer or whatever, I would always partake.
Yeah. You just want to make sure.
Yeah, I'm just
or I'm
checking.
just making sure.
Just checking.
Just checking.
Covering all my bases here.
Making sure we're good.
Yeah. So I don't actually, I genuinely could not tell you, the moment when I accepted Christ for myself. He just has kind of always been a part of my life.
Yeah.
And I feel so blessed by that.
Yeah.
I think in large part that was his way of really looking out for me. Because I think he just knew that I would need that level of faith of not ever knowing life without him.
Yes.
So
that's powerful.
Yeah, I definitely have had moments where my faith has deepened and where I've just had very particular moments with him that were really impactful, which, we'll probably talk about a little bit more, but I don't have that one conversion moment, which when I was younger actually made me feel like I didn't have a testimony. Because growing up in the church world, this isn't as much the case now. I feel like we're starting to move out of this, but when I was growing up, maybe this is the case now and it just isn't in our church.
Yeah.
But as a kid, I always saw testimonies as being this big, come to Jesus kind of moment where you were totally living against him and living against the word, and then you met Christ and everything just changed and your life just did a 180.
Yeah.
And so in my head, that's what a testimony was. And so I felt like I didn't have one. And I remember I was 15 or 16 and I was talking to some mentors of mine at the time, and I was just telling them this. I was like, I just feel like I don't really have a testimony because I don't even remember really getting saved. It's just kind of always been a part of who I am.
Yeah.
And I remember they looked at me and they were like, Lizzy, do you not realize that the fact that you've never turned away from him is a testimony in and of itself? And
especially with everything that you went through growing up.
Yeah. And I just, it was the first time that someone had said something to me that made me realize that a testimony doesn't have to be what I thought it had to be. Your testimony is truly just you testifying to the goodness and the faithfulness of God in your life.
Yes.
And you telling others, what Peter says, why you have hope in him.
Yeah.
And so that really started to reshape my thinking. And so since then, I've really come to more of a fullness of an understanding of what a testimony is. And so.
That's so good.
Yeah.
I think it's important to give a platform to both types of testimony. And not even that there's two kinds, really, the dramatic and then what you're talking about. Yeah. Everybody who believes in Jesus has something to say about him.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
And your testimony doesn't even have to be a moment of salvation. Like you said, it can just be anything that he's done for you, anything that he's pulled you out of, anything that is going to bring glory to his name that you can say is a testimony.
Yeah.
It's so important that I think we just invite all kinds to the circle, so that nobody feels like left out, or like, I don't know if you like felt shame or anything like that because you felt like you didn't have this big experience that other people were talking about, you know?
Yeah.
When your testimony is just as powerful as theirs, it's just different.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so important.
It is. Cool. You want to move on?
Yeah.
Okay. So question number 2 is about character. I thought this one was so fun. I can't wait to talk about it. What character traits of God and or promises of God are most meaningful to you, and why?
I love this question. I think at different points in my life, different things have been highlighted for me about God.
Yeah.
But I think the overwhelming, like, umbrella for all of it is just his kindness.
Yeah.
I think, you know, we think of God and generally, like, we think about how loving he is and how faithful he is and his provision and all those things, which is, yes, all true and have all, you know, hit me at different moments. But I think over it all, I mean, his love, obviously, but I think a big thing for him is just his kindness. Like, there is no kindness like God's.
Yes.
And I just see that in so many ways in my life. Just the way that he has supported me, the ways that he provided for me, not just like in like a financial way or like a physical way, but just spiritually and emotionally, the way that he like set things in place for me in my life to make sure that I had everything I needed for every experience that I went through and all of that. It just, like, when I look back and I think about it, I'm just like, wow, God, you're so kind.
I was about to say, it's hard to like feel it in the moment because oftentimes our like circumstances will make us feel more emotive than God will make us feel emotive in that moment. But when we can look back and see that he was there, then you're like, whoa, that he's been there the whole time. And though I didn't like feel it or know it in the moment, like, he's loved me in every place that I've been in, and he's taken care of me in every place that I've been in, you know? Yeah,
I think about that even just, I feel like I've really just recently had this revelation, but just my name. My name is Elizabeth, and Elizabeth means consecrated to God or dedicated to God, like belonging to him.
Yes.
And I think about that in what I was just talking about, how I've never known life without him. And it's because literally from the moment I was born and probably before that, every time someone spoke my name, they were speaking to the fact that I belong to him.
Yeah.
And I just...
That's so good.
Like, I think about that and I'm like, man, how kind of you to give me a name that's going to declare something over me.
Yeah.
That's going to keep me close to you for the rest of my life. You know, like that.
That's beautiful.
I just love that about him.
That makes me want to cry.
I know. I really just probably in the last couple of months have really understood the fullness of that. And I know my parents were so intentional about praying over each of us and asking the Lord for our names. And even just like my middle name, Anne, which means grace, and just thinking about, I feel like the grace that the Lord put on me to be able to handle every situation that I have walked through. Just the thought that he gave those names to my parents because he knew that I was going to need that spoken over me every single day. There's just no other word for it other than that he's so kind. I feel like he just is kindness exemplified in every possible way. Yeah. So
it makes me think when you're talking about being like consecrated to God even before you had consciousness, like from the moment that your parents were prayerful and decided on your name, like that was it. Yeah. And that came from God. I think about this past week I read Isaiah 40. I think it's 43. You might have to fact check me. But Isaiah 43 is like literally the most beautiful love letter that anyone could get from the Lord. And he just repeats, he's speaking to Israel, but he just repeats over and over and over again, I've done this for you and this for you and this for you. You are mine. I love you. Yeah. I've done this for you. Oh, it makes me so emotional.
I know what you're talking about.
But it is so powerful to see how much he just cares.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And he calls us his, and he's not letting us go.
Yeah.
Type of thing. So
yeah, it's so beautiful. Just like the foresight that he has for our lives is like blows me away every time I look back on like anything in my past and I realize like where I am now and the things that God put in place when I didn't even realize.
Yeah.
Because he knew where I was going to one day be.
Yeah.
It just like blows my mind.
Right.
Like his forethought for every single thing that we need at every single moment of our lives.
Yeah.
For every single one of us is just insane. It's so beautiful. So yeah, kindness is a big one, like an overarching thing for me in my whole life. I think something that he's really been revealing to me very heavily in the last couple of months that I'm seeing was a theme throughout my whole life, but I'm just now realizing it is like what it actually means for him to be strong in our weakness and like the strength of God. And I think it really started for me, I guess it was probably about a month ago now. I did my first ever biblical fast, which is like kind of weird for me to say that it was my first because again, I grew up in church, like I work in ministry. You would think like fasting is something that Jesus expected his followers to do with regularity.
Right.
And so over the last year, I was feeling it more and more impressed upon my heart to begin fasting. And I just really wanted to understand it before I ever did it. And I wanted to make sure I did it right. So I took a lot of time to study fasting and listen to sermons and things like that to like go into it with the right like knowledge and also heart posture.
Right.
So I finally did my first one. I guess this was the beginning of this month, actually.
Yeah.
No, we're in March now. So the beginning of February, I did my first fast. And I just did a 24-hour no food fast. And I remember...
And if you don't know this girl, she loves her snacks.
I do. I'm like every 3 hours I need
something. She is a foodie.
Yes.
And for her to do 24 hours was big.
It was big. And I'm not even like, I don't eat large amounts. I just have to have something small like every couple of hours. Yeah. Yes. I'm a grazer.
You graze.
Yes. And so I really had to prep myself for this.
Mentally, yeah.
So I was doing it, and I was fasting for a specific thing, but also I was just fasting for the sake of fasting and
like learning how to do it,
learning the significance of it, and just like learning to feed myself spiritually. So I remember it was about halfway through the day. It was a work day, so we were sitting in the office, and it was probably right around lunchtime, and I like turned over to you and I'm like, I
can't do this anymore.
I am done. Like, I don't feel like I'm getting anything out of this.
Yeah.
I feel like it is like, why am I even doing this? Right. I don't think the Lord's speaking to me in any new profound ways. Like, I've been doing what I feel like I'm supposed to. I've been reading my Bible when I want to eat, and I've been seeking him in prayer and all of these things. And I'm like, I can't do this. And you were just like, why don't you just read your Bible some more? Like, you got this. You're just encouraging
just trying to be encouraging.
And so I opened up my Bible, and actually, we'll just pull it up. I opened up my Bible, and I have been, for the students, for our student ministry, we've been learning about Saul. And so I was reading in 1 Samuel, just kind of reading Samuel's history and leading into Saul and all of that. So I open it up and I get to 1 Samuel and I'm reading, and I get to the part where it's Hannah's prayer. So Hannah is Samuel's mother, and it's her prayer to the Lord after he blesses her with Samuel because she had just been seeking him for
Right.
a child. She so desperately wanted a child. And so the Lord finally gives her Samuel. So I was reading Hannah's prayer, which is one of the most beautiful prayers. Just so glorifying to the Lord, and just like what you were just saying about Isaiah, where it's everything that the Lord had done for them. It's a similar concept. So I'm reading this prayer. It's 1 Samuel 2, if you want to read it. But I got to this verse, and it says, it's verse 5, and it says, "Those who are full hire themselves out for food, but those who are hungry are hungry no more." And I remember I read this, and like, I was sitting in the office.
I remember the moment.
I like literally started crying. And I looked over at you, and I was like, oh my gosh, like, he's so good. Like, he's just so good. And I just had this like realization and revelation that the purpose of fasting ultimately is that we are making ourselves weak intentionally.
Yes.
So that he can be made strong through that. And so that he can receive glory through that. And I literally have a note in my Bible about that. And I just remember in that moment, like, realizing what it truly means to allow the Lord to be strong in your weakness. And I feel like ever since then, over the last month, he has just continued to highlight that to me in so many different ways. And I'm so thankful for that. And I just want to pull my notes out to make sure I don't forget to say anything about this, because it really has been
so important to you.
Yeah. And just so impactful. And, so when I look back on the rest of my life and the trials that he brought me through and all of that, I just am realizing more and more how often he showed so much great strength in all of my weakest moments when I like look back and I'm like, God, like, I should not have made it through that.
Yeah.
Which, you know, and we'll get into more of like the specific events of my life here in a little bit, but I truly don't think that like I should even be alive.
Right.
And to look back and just realize in every moment when I felt so weak and so insignificant and so unseen and unworthy and unsafe, and how great and mighty he was in those moments to protect me, to defend me, to speak life over me. I'm like, wow, like being strong in our weakness is not just like something that you just say to make us feel better when we are realizing like how inadequate we are.
Right.
You know, it's like, it's true. Like, it is such truth that he has such great strength and he wants to use it for our benefit. But when we're stuck in a place where we're like, no, I got this. And I was actually just talking to this with the students on Wednesday night this week. I was just telling them how one of the things I struggle with as far as pride is like, oh, I have it all together. Like, I'm good. I'm okay. I'm okay. I've got it. And it takes such credit away from God.
Yeah.
When we say that and when we think that we can handle any situation, we can get through whatever life throws at us.
Yeah.
And when we are relying on our own strength and not on the Lord's.
Yeah.
And even just in seeking healing over things that we've gone through, like, I don't always want to seek healing because I want to think that I have it all together and that I'm okay. And I don't always want people to know that that's not the case. And it just takes such credit away from him and the strength that he has, because it's in those moments of weakness for us that he is like truly glorified.
I know.
And just looking back on my life, like I really feel like, and we've talked about this before, and I think maybe we've even talked about it on the podcast before, but I feel like I have such a gift of faith. And I think that's one of the ways that he has shown me his strength in my weakness, that in moments that should have pulled me away from him, that should have made me question him, he has gifted me with something that allows me to continue to rely on him through everything. And that's not a me thing. Like, I don't have that faith because of who I am. I have that faith because of who he is.
Right.
And that just shows such strength.
That's powerful.
In him.
Yes.
To have given me that and allowed me to have that kind of faith.
Yeah.
That is outside of the norm. And I just, yeah.
I love that so much. Because, I mean, you're basically saying the verse, I don't know where it is, but the verse that says, his strength is made perfect.
Yes.
In our weakness.
Yes.
And when I think of that, I'm like, he would rather us be weak. Like, he's not a God that is really like, pull yourself up from your bootstraps, like, be strong. Like, he tells us to be, like, courageous and bold, but, you know, he doesn't expect us to be or act like him.
Yeah.
Like, he's like, you can be weak. Actually, it's better when you're weak.
Yeah.
Because then I can show my perfect strength.
Yes.
And that just makes me think of, like, Dad.
Yeah.
It's emotional because he's like, I want you to be dependent on me.
Yeah.
You know, he's like, I want you to weak so that you can lean on me and see how strong I am and see that I'm going to take care of you. Like, if you're strong all the time, how are you supposed to know that I can and will take care of you in all the hard spots, you know?
Yeah.
It's so beautiful. I love that.
That's so good.
Right.
I think that's where, like, that pride thing that I was just talking about, when you just, like, when you say, like, it makes you think of Dad.
Yeah.
I didn't think I was going to talk about this, but I'll go ahead and talk about it.
Go ahead.
Literally just this week, I had a moment of revelation from the Lord where I just realized that I was holding on to things that I didn't even know I was.
Yeah.
And I think in our very first episode, talked about how we both lost our dad when we were young. And I had this moment where I was like, God, I can't connect to you as my father and as my dad. And I think it's because I look at you as the one who took my dad.
Yeah.
And I don't consider myself an angry person.
Yeah.
I've never been an angry person.
Yeah.
I literally can count on one hand the number of times that I feel like I've felt true anger in my life. Even in moments when I probably should have been really angry and had every right to be really angry, I never felt it. I just had this moment of like, oh my gosh, God, I think I'm actually mad at you. Like, I really think I'm actually mad at you. And just like feeling the weight of that, but then also knowing that in that moment of anger and in those feelings of anger from me to him, he's so strong to carry it.
Yeah.
And to take it.
He's the one that brought it up.
Yeah.
He's the one that revealed it to you.
Yeah.
That you were angry at him.
Yes.
But he wants to like walk you through that so ultimately you guys are going to be closer.
Yeah. And I think that's just the ultimate example of his strength being made perfect in us, because it could be argued that it's almost a weakness to be angry, and especially to be angry and not know it. But the fact that God is so strong to be able to carry every bit of anger that all of us have towards him, because it's easy to need someone to blame and to be mad at, and God can literally take it from the billions and billions of people that have ever existed. He's like just so mighty and so gracious to allow us to throw all of that on him and allow us to be weak in that moment and let him just take it all, because we need to release it, because we aren't strong enough to hold on to all of that, but he is.
Right.
And that's like our weakness is the fact that we literally are not capable of carrying all of that.
Right. I think it's also a testament to his power, like his strength, but also his power to just be able to handle that.
Yeah.
From how many people have ever existed? Ever?
Yeah.
I think it's like 14 billion.
Yeah.
I looked it up a couple years ago. I was like, how many people have ever walked this earth ever? And the estimation is 14 billion, 13, 14, something like that.
Which is so wild that like, I think it's like 8 or 9 billion now that are on the earth right now.
Yeah.
The exponential
because people
growth.
are little rabbits. They're
anyway,
just
sorry, that's a little
multiplying
topic,
and
but
multiplying and multiplying.
Blows my mind.
I know. Anyways. Yes.
Yeah. And I just, just this, I'm just really learning more and more about how strong he is in our weakness and how gracious it is of him to allow us to be weak.
Yes.
Because if we had to be strong all the time, we would fall to pieces.
Right.
Like that, I think about all of the people who are going through such hard things and feel like I remember feeling like I had the weight of the world on my shoulders for so long.
Mm-hmm.
And that was with me knowing God and knowing who he was and knowing that he was carrying it with me.
Right.
But to think of everyone who doesn't have that revelation that you can be weak and let him carry it.
Right.
It will tear you to pieces.
Yes.
You will crumble beneath it.
Yeah. It's heavy.
Yeah.
That's so awesome.
Yeah. So those are the characteristics of him that
My favorite question so far.
are really just hitting hard for me right now.
Yeah. That's so powerful. I love
He's
that.
so good.
He is good. Okay. Question 3 is about calling. So, where do you join Christ in serving others? Why this place/project? What have you seen God do in you, through you, or in spite of you? How does serving shape your faith?
I'll probably keep this one brief because I think when you work full-time in ministry, I feel like that's an easy question to answer.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I work at a church. I
Literally.
am pouring into
Lots of people all the time.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to say that in like I got my calling figured out kind of way.
No, but it's just the nature of your job.
Yeah.
You know? We are here for the people.
Yes, and I do very much feel like that's my calling, is to share with others and to pour into them in this specific way, in this specific season. And I think serving in any capacity is like the easiest way to know Christ's heart.
Yeah.
Because Christ came with the sole purpose of serving us.
Yes.
And saving us. And so when we serve in whatever capacity that is, whether it's full-time ministry, whether you just come and serve on a Sunday morning at your church,
Right.
whether you're at your community kitchen,
Right.
or at your job.
Right. So many jobs, like I know us and our church are firm believers that you can do ministry everywhere and anywhere. It doesn't matter what occupation you hold. Like everywhere you step outside of your church and home is a mission field.
Yes.
And so, I think of like teachers and people that work in hospitals. I'm like, most jobs, you're serving someone else.
Yeah.
And that's wild.
Yes. It's just the nature of the world.
Yeah.
Like the world doesn't go around without servants, And
You right.
That's who Jesus was. And we are ultimately meant to be a reflection of him.
Yeah. Even if you're not a Christian, it's like you serve people, like you hold that part of Jesus's identity.
Yeah.
Even if you don't like acknowledge him and believe in him, like you're doing something that he did. And though, it's sad because he's not getting the glory for it, but that affects somebody's life.
Yeah.
When they feel like someone has served them in a certain way, and that's so powerful.
Yeah.
If we would just acknowledge that, like, Jesus was the perfect servant.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So that's really good.
Yeah. Serving is just important in whatever capacity. And also I feel like if you don't feel like you know what your calling is, so what? Like, I feel like there's so much pressure put on that to figure out what you're supposed to do, what you're called to do, especially in the church world. Like, oh, what are you called to do? What is the Lord calling you to do? Like,
I feel like I've recently, started, well, not recently. I'd say within the past year have been thinking a lot about that, in the sense that, I think we all have specific assignments that we're to do in our life.
Yes.
But ultimately, every single believer is called to do the exact same thing.
Yeah, like the Bible makes it really clear.
Disciples.
Yeah.
Love God.
Love people.
And I'm just like, people are like, what am I supposed to do with my calling? That's what you're supposed to do with your life.
God,
It doesn't matter.
love people.
It doesn't matter where you're doing it or in what capacity you're doing it. It matters if you're doing it or not. And
so good.
People can get so caught up in occupational calling and oh, I'm supposed to be a preacher, I'm supposed to be a missionary, or I'm supposed to do all these different things, and all these things are great. but I see them as assignments.
Yes.
I don't see them as like life calling.
Yeah.
Because Jesus just said to follow him.
Mm-hmm. And I also think about Jesus himself. Obviously, he had such a great assignment. A huge, biggest assignment of anyone ever.
Yeah.
And he didn't start it until he was 30 years old.
Right.
And up until that, he's just being a carpenter, building stuff.
He's chilling.
You know?
Learning the Father, learning himself, probably.
Yes.
You know, it's crazy to think that, well, I won't get into that, but yeah.
Like, why are we putting all this pressure on these 17 and 18-year-olds to figure out their whole life when Jesus himself didn't start doing what he was called to do till he was 30?
And he only did it for 3 years.
I know. I'm like...
Given he did die, but...
Give us a break,
but
people.
like, yeah. His biggest assignment, his biggest accomplishment was fulfilled in a time span of 3 years.
Yeah.
So what makes us think that our lifelong career, you know what I mean?
I know.
Like,
it makes me so mad.
It's simple.
Yeah.
It's so simple. We make it complicated.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I mean, like, I did that. From the time I was really young, thought I was supposed to be a teacher.
Yeah.
And I went to school for it. Mm-hmm. Like, I have 2 degrees.
Yeah.
In order to be a high school teacher. And I did it for a year.
Yeah.
A little over a year, technically.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, this is where I put myself.
Right.
Because I felt like I needed a calling.
Right.
And because I felt like my giftings had to align with my job.
Yes. Sometimes they don't.
Sometimes they don't. Now, granted, do I feel like I'm teaching now? Yes.
Mm-hmm.
But just because I have a gift of teaching doesn't mean I need to be a teacher.
Right.
You know? And so I just think there's just so much pressure put on that, and it makes me mad.
Yeah.
It just makes me mad.
Makes me mad.
Yeah. Like,
that's good.
Just take a step back. Trust the Lord that he's going to put you in the right place at the right time. Mm-hmm. And if you got to do something to make money until then do it. Just don't sit around and just assume that everything's going to come to you no problem because you're a Christ follower, because that's also not how it works.
No. Yeah.
But you don't have to put all this pressure on yourself to have it all figured out and have a career in place and, you know, XYZ.
I know. Well, I think about everything we're talking about, but then I envision the life of Jesus's disciples mm-hmm. and of the apostles. None of them had jobs. They were literally living day to day, traveling around and sharing the gospel. Yeah. Which, you know, that's not for everybody. I'm not saying that. And I'm not saying that everybody, you know what I mean. But like,
yeah.
Who are we getting? I guess it's society.
Yeah.
And just, you know, concepts that are passed down generationally, telling us that we need to do this whole career thing and this whole job thing. When, yeah, you need to find a way to make money, but like.
Yeah. God will work it out.
Like, just like follow Jesus.
Yeah.
And he'll, like you said, place you, listen to him, and be obedient. That's the hardest part, is just listening and being obedient. But other than that, he's going to take care of it, and he's going to tell you what you're supposed to do.
Yes, every single time.
Yeah. Good.
Yay.
Next.
All
right.
It's going to be the hard one.
Okay. Question number 4 is about circumstance. So, tell us an important event which shaped and or strengthened your faith.
So I think circumstances is the biggest part of my testimony that has really shaped me and shaped my relationship with the Lord, which is probably the case for a lot of people. And if you feel like your testimony isn't rooted in your conversion, then it's probably rooted in your circumstances. Mm-hmm. I have 3, technically 4, like big events that I think really shaped my faith and grew me in it and grew me closer to the Lord, drew me closer to the Lord. Mm-hmm. And I think like the first major 2 were the deaths of my parents.
Yeah.
So when I was 6, my dad got diagnosed with cancer. Mm-hmm. And I also had my oldest brother who has some pretty severe mental illnesses, and that makes life really difficult in a lot of ways. And I'm not really going to get too much into that because I think that's the primary part of my testimony that I'm not fully healed on yet.
Yeah.
And so I just won't talk too much about that, but it did cause a lot of issues in a lot of different ways. But so then when you add a sick parent on top of that, it just makes life hard. And so my dad was in and out of the hospital all the time, and I was 6 when he got diagnosed. So I don't have a lot of memories of him when he was healthy.
Right.
I think that he initially was given about 6 months to live. Yeah.
What kind of cancer was it?
Leukemia.
Okay.
And
is that blood?
It's like blood and bone marrow and all that stuff. It's really a disease of your blood cells, but and so my dad actually lived a lot longer than that. So he passed away like 2 months before my 10th birthday. So
like 4 years.
Almost 4 years.
And he lived 3.5 more.
Yes.
3.5 years more.
Yes. And so that in and of itself, like even the doctors said, like, this is miraculous.
Yeah.
And he actually was cancer-free, I believe. He was technically in remission when he died.
Yeah.
But the toll that chemo takes on your body, I could go into it. I'm not going to get into that, but I could get into the whole cancer world.
Yeah.
But I just have so many memories of like him being in the hospital for Christmas or for birthdays, and like just the fear that it planted in me to like experience the possibility of death at 6 years old, when I didn't fully understand what cancer was, but I knew that it could take my dad from me.
Yeah.
Is something that I've battled really ever since, of just the fear of losing loved ones. And I actually feel like I've just recently kind of been delivered of that, which I don't think I've told you about.
You know what's flipping hilarious?
What?
Same.
What? We talk all the time about how in tune our walks with the Lord are.
Even when we're not talking about it, like the same things are happening. It was the women's gathering when Shirley talked about fear, and I was like, what's my biggest fear? Death of my loved ones.
Yeah.
And I went and got prayer for it, and I feel like since then I've had, I don't know if I'm like 100% like there, but I have felt more peace than I have felt in a long time.
It doesn't plague my mind the way that it always has.
Right.
Mine was at Shabbat. Wow.
Making moves.
Thank you, Lord.
Thank you, Jesus.
So anyways, but that's where that got started for me. It was 6 years old. And I feel like when you're that young and you're exposed to that and your mind is still developing, it like developmentally, I think, shifts something for you.
It's like, shoot, this can happen and it will keep happening.
Yes. And it's
It's the
so, and I was very close to my dad. I was 100% a daddy's girl.
Yeah.
And so when he died, it was like, I like almost instantly felt such a shift in my heart and my spirit, because the dad is really the one who speaks identity into you.
Yeah.
And like I just immediately started struggling with self-image. My whole middle school experience, I was in 4th grade when he died. And so from then on, especially through middle school, it was just so hard. Like looking back now, I actually remember a couple of times my mom asked me, like, Lizzy, do you think you're depressed? And like then
my mom used to ask me the same thing, and I'd be like, Mom, no,
I'm not depressed. I'm just tired.
Yeah.
And at that point, mental health was not talked about the way that it is now. Like mental health, I feel like changed so rapidly.
Yeah.
Really, I think it was when I was in college that it started to pick up and the taboo around it started to fall away a little bit.
Yeah.
So for me in middle school, to think I was depressed, I was like, no, I'm not going to be one of those weird depressed kids.
Yeah.
You know?
Emo girl.
But I think I totally was.
Yeah.
And I just got mean, and miraculously my friends stuck by me, and I'm so thankful for them. But so that was really tough. And then also around the same time that my dad died, my mom had been diagnosed with cancer. So she was going through chemo the summer after he passed away, which was really hard. And I spent a majority of that summer at my best friend's house. my sister and I were there, and my brothers went with my grandparents through my mom's chemo treatments. And so that was really hard as well.
What kind of cancer was hers?
She had Hodgkin's lymphoma, I think is what it is.
Is that like...
It's like your lymph nodes and stuff.
Right, okay.
Yeah. She beat it, thank God. And when I got into high school, things got a little better for me. And then the first week of my sophomore year, my mom was killed very tragically and unexpectedly. And so that just like totally 180'd our life.
Right. You thought you were kind of like done with the bad experiences and the trauma, and then
oh great,
boom, out of nowhere.
Yes. And so we wound up moving in with my aunt and cousins. And so I really regard my cousins as siblings rather than cousins. And we were really close even before we lived together. Yeah. But that just like,
elevated.
Yes. And I really, really struggled with that, and just like trying to come to grips with being an orphan was really hard. I remember when I called my best friend to tell her that my mom had died. I remember I was sitting on my aunt's back porch, and it was the night, it was that night after we'd found out she had died. And I called my best friend, and I told her that my mom had died. And I literally said to her, I was like, I'm an orphan. And I just like started bawling, and I was like, I don't even know what to do with this.
Yeah.
Like, and so for me, that really started this journey, which, like I just said, I'm kind of just now coming to terms with how much I really need to seek the Lord as my parent, and how I'm obviously still struggling with that, but just learning to lean into him for things that typically you would look to your parents for can be so beautiful and redeeming in a lot of ways. But it's still very much a journey that I'm on. But I think through those two losses and other things that were happening around the same time, I very much feel like I lost a lot of my childhood and didn't feel like I had the freedom to really just be a kid.
Right.
And so...
especially shoveling poop.
Yeah.
Sorry. Oh, sorry. I don't know why. Intrusive thought. Oh my gosh. Reel in. My bad. Anyways.
Yeah. Especially that. Definitely the worst part of my childhood is that right there.
I'm so sorry. It was totally a joke.
No. That was funny. Oh gosh. So anyways, yes, I especially after my mom died, I was the oldest girl. And for any of you oldest girls out there, even without your parents dying, like the expectation that kind of automatically puts on you.
Yeah.
And I felt like I had to be an adult long before I was one. And I think that was really hard. And I think I struggled with that for a while, of just wanting so badly to just be a kid and not have to be responsible for anything or anyone, but knowing that wasn't an option for me most of the time. And that's not to say anything against my mom or my aunt or any adult in my family, because with the situations that we were in, they did such incredible jobs.
Yeah.
And I do truly have so many great memories of my childhood because of them.
Yeah.
And the way that they tried so hard to give us as much normalcy as they possibly could given the situation.
Right.
And I'm so thankful for mothers in my life who prioritized that as much as they possibly could. As amazing as the adults in my life were, it didn't take away the fact that I just lost so much of my childhood. And that was something that I really had to come to terms with when I became an adult. And I think it was redeemed in a lot of ways, which I'll talk about in a second, but I think going through those losses, one, it made me really lean into the Lord a lot more. And that's where that like gift of faith and just like knowing I was consecrated to him, I think that really came into play, because even just seeing other members of my family and how it made them question him. But I never did. Like, I never questioned his goodness. I never questioned his grace. I don't think, like, if I had a button that I could press to undo it all, I wouldn't press it, because I think if I did that, I would lose the faith that I have. And just the reliance that I have on God, and the ability to see him working good in every situation.
Even in like the worst of the worst of the worst.
Yeah. And the way that I just know that he is good.
Yeah.
I don't think I would have that if it hadn't been tested
right
in the way that it was. So yeah, I think those two events were big for me, in that I just had to lean on the Lord in a way that I never would have had to otherwise.
Right. Yeah.
And also just learn things about myself. It brought out characteristics in me that I think have been valuable, you know, and just, yeah, I think it's taught me so much about myself as well as about God.
Right.
So those are the first two big ones. And then the next event that I think really shaped me and strengthened my faith was actually getting married and just like meeting my husband in general. When I met him, I was in a really, really rough spot emotionally.
Yeah.
I was about 3 months out of a really hard breakup, and just through that breakup, I think it brought up a lot of feelings of losing people that I just was having to process, that I had kind of shoved down. Because in all of that reliance on the Lord through those losses, I didn't actually deal with them. It was very much like, someone explained it to me recently, of like, you've kind of just been running on adrenaline. Like, you just got to get through the next thing. You just got to make it through. You just got to make it through. And so I never really gave myself time to just sit with it. And in the months before I met my husband, I was at a place where I was kind of sitting with it a little bit. Not completely, but I was starting to. And I was really torn up over the breakup and over all those other things, and was not looking for anyone in any way. But God knew. Like, he just knew what I was going to need and what I did need. And so we met, and it was actually another 3 months after we first met before we started dating.
Yeah.
And just to see the way that Kyle waited for me to be at a place where I was prepared to allow myself to have a relationship that would really hurt if I lost again. And the way that he was so patient and just willing to let me walk through and work through whatever it was that I was going through, and just trusting the Lord to put us together at exactly the right time was just like, the way that it built up my self-worth of living so many years feeling like I was worth basically nothing, to seeing this man who literally, I was supposed to go to Germany for a 6-month study abroad program. And the week that I was supposed to fly out, it got canceled because of COVID. But he wrote me a letter and said several things. But one of the things that he said was that he knew I was getting ready to leave, but he believes that the Lord brought us together and allowed us to meet for a reason, and that he would still be here when I got back.
Yeah.
And we had only known each other for not even 6 months at that point, weren't even officially dating.
Yeah.
And yet he was willing to wait 6 months for me.
Yeah.
And I hadn't even committed to anything with him yet.
Oh my gosh. I have similar things with Derek that I don't know if I've told you. That's just making things pop up, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I did,
Yeah.
Derek did the same thing for me, but in a different way. That's crazy.
Yeah. It just
That's so powerful. Oh my gosh.
Redeemed my self-worth in so many ways.
Like, you're worth the wait.
That's yes.
Yeah.
And I just, it was like, wow, for a man to say this to me and we are not even officially dating.
Yeah.
Versus past experiences where I'd already had established relationship and I wasn't worth that. Mm-hmm. It was like,
man,
wow. Like,
breath of fresh air.
Yes.
Thank you, Kyle.
The Lord placing someone in my life who he knew was going to value me. Mm-hmm. And so thank God that trip got canceled, because I don't know what would have happened had I gone to Germany. Mm-hmm. And then when we got married, and even before we got married, I think the most redeeming thing about him, because marriage is meant to be a reflection of Jesus and the church. Yeah. And Jesus himself is the ultimate redemption. And so I think it's really beautiful to pay attention to the ways that your marriage redeems things for you, because it's like, it's that reflection of Christ and his redemption. Yeah. And just,
I love that.
Thinking about how, not just for me, but my husband as well, like we both had experiences where we just didn't have the childhood that we could have or should have. Mm-hmm. But especially for me, like, just knowing when I was growing up, like, I felt like I had to have it all together. I had to be the mature one. I had to set the good example. Right. I had to be responsible. I couldn't, like, mess up. I couldn't just be a kid. Right. And now, like, my relationship with Kyle is like, I can be so goofy and so silly. Yeah. And, like, we can run around the house and play tag with each other.
Right. Well, you feel secure. You're not, like, walking around on eggshells, like, waiting for the next shoe to drop. Like, you're not scared. Like, you don't want to mess up, but you're, like, not scared to, like, make a mistake because you know that he's committed and he sees you as worthy and he's sticking in for the long haul.
Yeah, and I just think back to, as a kid, my house was never peaceful. Mm-hmm. Like, I never just felt at peace at home. Never felt like I could relax and just, like, be chill. Yes. And the peace that I feel when I'm with him and when I'm in our home and, like, it's just us and we're just there. It's like the most peaceful refuge, like, anything that I've ever experienced. Yeah. And I remember when I realized that when we were dating, like, oh my gosh, like, you feel like home. Like, I've never, and I'm going to get emotional, but I've never felt home the way that I do when I'm with him. And to know my experience as a kid and what home was like when I would go home, I would always be so apprehensive because I didn't know what was coming. I didn't know what things were going to be like when I walked through the door. And to know that now, like, my home is the one place I always want to be. Yeah. Because, not even because of the place, but because of Kyle. The presence. Because of him. Yeah. And because of the way that Holy Spirit is stewarded in our home. Is just so, like, and literally I feel like I can be a kid with him. And I can just be silly and goofy and
so part of redemption in your marriage is that you do get your childhood back.
Yes, exactly.
Type of thing.
Exactly.
Because you can be little.
Yeah. And we can just laugh and have fun. And it's like all of those things in my childhood of having to have it all together and just be perfect.
Right.
Like, Kyle doesn't care about my imperfections.
Yeah.
He doesn't care if I'm struggling one day. He doesn't care if I'm, you know, having a bad day and I just can't really handle all my responsibilities for whatever reason.
And this is tying back to the weakness and strength thing.
Yeah.
Like Kyle, as God, says you can be weak and I'll be strong. Kyle, like Jesus,
Yeah. Steps in when I'm
steps in
struggling.
and says, it's okay that you're weak, I'm strong.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And like in so many ways, he has really like ran that home for me on days when like I'm just not with it. And he's like, he'll just look at me and be like, you know, it's okay if you don't do all of this today. Like, for someone to say that to me, like, the way that just, for a while, at first, didn't even compute in my mind. Like,
Right.
oh, I can't do everything I'm supposed to do. Like, it's okay for me to not do it all.
Yeah. What?
Didn't make sense.
Who told you that you had to do everything all the time, Lizzy?
Yeah. So I think the way that my marriage has made me see the goodness of God just has made me love the Lord so much more, which is exactly what marriage is supposed to do. It's supposed to be a reflection of him and his love for us and his relationship with us. And I think that's just so beautiful. And yeah, it's just exemplified his kindness in a whole new way for me.
I love that.
So
that's powerful.
Yeah. And then my last event, I think, was just the way that I got this job.
Yeah. That was it was a miracle, but it was just like so cool to be an outsider and watch, like me being an outsider to the situation and watch everything play out.
Yeah, it was just such a walk of faith for me in a way that I had not been tested in this way before. I had a teaching job. It was secure. Like, I knew I was getting my paycheck, all of that. And when I was offered the internship here with no certainty that it would lead to a full-time job.
Yeah.
But Kyle and I both just felt like the Lord was saying, yes, do it.
Yeah.
And so we did. And I took a significant pay decrease.
Yeah. During
that internship. That wound up being 7 months. It was supposed to be 3 months. And I think, like, walking that out, and then, you know, by the end of it, I was like, do I need to go get a teaching job? Like, what's going on? And they were like, well, we really want you here. We feel like you're supposed to be here. We just don't have the funds for another full-time position right now.
Right.
But they were like, you know what, we could extend your internship till the end of the year. And I was like, well, do I hold off on going and finding a full-time job to do this? Or do I go the secure way financially? So I took the extension for the internship, which was just another step of like, Lord,
I trust you.
We're trusting you. And through this, like, you know, he was just doing so much with our finances in general, like teaching Kyle about the significance of tithing, because he hadn't grown up in a home where tithing was taught. I think that's the hardest thing for Christians to understand is tithing.
It's
just tough. And so we were walking through that and like just so many things. And this was the first time during this that I had ever felt worried about finances. Like, growing up, my mom was so good about teaching us to trust the Lord for our financial provision.
Yes.
And so I'd never been worried about finances before. And I was during this time. I was like, kept telling Kyle, I was like, I feel like I need to be helping more. I need to be contributing more, like all of this. And then about, I want to say it was like 3 weeks before I got offered the full-time job. Yeah. Which was about 2 weeks before my internship was supposed to be over, was when they finally were able to offer me a full-time job. About 3 weeks before that, I had been looking for jobs because I knew my internship's coming to the end. I still haven't heard anything.
Right.
Like, I'm probably just going to have to go find something else. So I started looking for jobs. And then about 3 weeks before I got offered this position, I just felt like the Holy Spirit was like, stop looking. Just stop. And didn't give me any other answers other than just stop looking. And so I did. And 3 weeks later.
That audio on Instagram where it's not Kevin Bacon, Kevin Hart? I don't know. Kevin, and it's like, come here. Look at me.
Yes.
Right here.
Yes. We're
And
doing
it's
the
like
comedy.
Holy Spirit when you're about to like do something crazy.
Yes.
And he's like, look at me.
Yes.
Look at me.
That's exactly what it was. It was just like a constant like, hey, I got this. I got this. I got this. Just keep doing what I tell you to do. I got this.
Yes.
And then I got the job, and it just, that whole journey, it actually was close to a year from the time that they first talked to me about the potential full-time position and doing the internship to when I actually started the internship to when I got the job was almost a full year.
Right.
It was
a
just
long time for you to just not know.
Yeah. And I literally didn't,
happen.
I had no idea if I was going to get a full-time job, if I was going to be jobless at the end of December. Wow. Like, I just didn't know. But it taught me so much, not just me personally, but like Kyle and I together as a unit of trusting the Lord and his faithfulness and his goodness to provide. He provided for us in so many amazing ways during that year. So that's the most recent event that I think just has really strengthened my faith. Yeah.
So good.
Yeah.
I love that.
That was so long.
It's okay. That was like the bulk of like your you're saying. You have these more specific moments and experiences that make up your testimony versus like a salvation conversion moment. And so it's totally worth spending that much time on. Yeah. Seriously. That's good.
Last question.
Here we go. For centuries, the faithful wrote their last will and testament, aka their testimony. What spiritual message would you like to leave your loved ones? I love this question.
I do love this question. I feel like when I was trying to prepare for this, I was struggling to know what to even say.
Yeah. You want to say so much.
Yeah, like
but to like condense it is so hard.
Yeah. Like if I could leave people with one thing from my life that I want everyone to hold on to.
I feel emotional.
How do you pick that?
It's really like your legacy, like after you've passed on.
Yeah.
What do you want people to remember that hopefully you exemplified in your life, you know?
Yeah. I think, I don't know that this is the only thing or even the best thing that I could say.
Right.
But
it's the honest thing.
Yeah, and just the first thing that comes to my mind.
Yeah.
I remember, like, especially in high school, a lot of times people would ask me, like, you know, how are you doing this? Like, how are you still doing so well from the outside? Because I really wanted to look like I was doing well. How are you handling everything that you've gone through, losing your parents and this and that? And like my answer was always, it's just the Lord. Like it's just the Lord.
Doesn't make sense, but it's the truth sometimes.
Yeah. Which I think really I just keep going back to the fact that every time someone says my name, they're just speaking over to me that I belong to him.
Yes.
And I think for me, so much of what I hope people get from my testimony is hope. Like, you can be in the worst of the worst.
Yeah.
In, you know, an unsafe environment, in, you know, just living a life that's full of loss and uncertainty and death and destruction and chaos and no peace. And yet you can still be hopeful and you can still have faith. And I was thinking about this a few months ago, and I was like, God, why is it that I am hopeful?
Yeah.
And it's not even that I'm hopeful that things will get better. Because I was, like, genuinely, especially as a kid, I was like, I know that life can be better.
Yeah.
But that really isn't even where the hope is rooted in.
Mm-hmm.
The hope is in the fact that even if my life is never any better than this,
Yeah.
there's something so great for me
Coming. Yeah.
and there's someone who is so great,
Mm-hmm.
who is walking with me through it.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't matter if my life stays this horrible forever.
That's so good.
Because
Whoa.
I would rather walk through a life where I literally lose every single person that means anything to me.
Yeah.
But be doing it with him
Then.
than to live a beautiful, perfect, easy life without him.
Yeah.
Like it
Lizzy, that's such a hard thing to say.
But it's so true.
It's so true. It's so hard to come to terms with that.
Yeah.
And to put the Lord in that place where you're like, God, I'm okay if you take everything away. If it's just, it makes me emotional, but it's like, it's okay if I literally have nothing else but you.
And
that's so hard to get there, and I'm so proud of you.
It was a struggle, I think, to get there. I think in that time period after that breakup, like before I met my husband and even after I met him, before we were like dating or anything, that was one of the big things that I wrestled with, because I just felt like, again, I had lost a person that meant so much to me. And it just highlighted all of the loss in my life. And I remember I had like 3 different worship songs that I played on repeat through that, and they were the focus of all 3 of them was basically, God, you are enough.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you are enough. And I had to literally just drill it into myself, because I'm not naturally like that. I am such I want people around me all of the time. The thought of living my life alone with just me and God, like, for the longest time I was like, I can't, like, God, I'm sorry, but I couldn't. I literally could not. And I think when you get to a place where you feel so broken that you have no other option but to, like, just weep in front of the Lord and be like, God, I don't think I can do this. And that's that strength and the weakness part of when you get to that part where you're that broken,
He shows up.
Yeah. And, like, you realize he's speaking these things over you that until that moment you weren't even able to hear, because you were so full of what you wanted for yourself. But when you get to a point where you've been forced to release all of that, and you're like, you know what, what good is it in having the life that I think I want anyways, when this is where it gets me? And so I think I got to that place, and I literally, there were so many times I just, like, cried myself to sleep praying to the Lord and just being like, God, I don't know what to do anymore. Like, I am so tired of losing people. Like, what am I supposed to do? And I just got to this really beautiful place with him where I realized, like, he's the only one who's not going to leave. He's literally the only one who I cannot lose in any capacity.
But that you won't. You know, also. Like, it's not possible.
Yeah, exactly. And I think getting to that point is what, like, settled my testimony for me, was realizing, oh my gosh, this is why I've always been hopeful. This is why I've always had the faith that I have, because my heart knew this. Even when, like, I didn't. My heart did and my spirit did. That it's okay if everyone else is gone because I've still got him.
Yeah.
And he's still waiting for me, and he's still walking with me.
Right.
And
he's the only thing that won't ever change.
Yes, he's so constant, and that for me is huge because so much of my life was never constant.
Yeah.
And to realize that I have this great constant in my life who just gives me so much hope is just unfathomable.
Have you heard you have because you've listened to that album, Constant One by Stephanie Gretzinger?
I think I don't know it word for word or anything, but
you need to go listen to that song because that's exactly what that song is about. It's so good. So good.
Yeah, so I think if I were to leave one thing, it would be that like
learn that God is enough.
Yeah, he is enough, and
there's always hope.
The only thing that you can place your hope and your faith in. And even if your life now doesn't get better, we can't hold him at ransom for that, you know?
Yeah.
Our hope isn't based on whether or not our life here on earth is going to be any better than it is now.
Right. Well, what's that scripture? It says our hope isn't in the things of this world, but ... I can't remember the second part, but that's what it reminds me of.
Yes. So that's, for me, the biggest thing is I always want to remember that that's what my hope is rooted in. So.
I love you.
Love you.
I love hearing because we've talked about, some of this, most of this before, but just actually having an intentional time to sit down and ask you questions and hear the whole thing.
Yeah.
Is so special, I feel for our friendship. Not only for whoever's listening, but just for us.
Yes.
I'm just so proud you're my friend. You're amazing.
Thanks.
I love you.
I love you.
Yay. Can you think of anything else you want to share before we outro?
I don't think so. I mean, there's things I didn't share, but it's just...
Right, not everything comes out at once, as we continue to study and, ask each other questions and, bring our life experience into the podcast.
Yeah.
Time really creates a more whole picture of who we are versus, trying to say everything in one podcast one episode.
And this episode is already so much longer than all our others.
It's okay. It's worth it. It's so worth it.
Yeah.
So, yay. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah. Well, tune in next time.
Yay! It's going to be my turn.
Because Allison will share hers, and I'm so excited.
I'm excited too. I have so many notes written out, and I was I'm going to have to condense. But now that Lizzy was able to sit and take the time, I'm okay, I can sit and take the time.
Take the time.
It's fine if it lasts a bit longer than normal. So,
yeah.
All right, you guys. Well, thanks for joining us. We just hope that you'll tune in next week where we have another testimony episode, and we love you guys. We're always in prayer just about the podcast and for you guys. So,
thank you so much for listening.
Thanks so much for tuning in.
I feel like we need to get better about saying this, but if you could leave a review and a rating on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, that would just help us so much.
Subscribe on YouTube.
So appreciate, subscribe, comment, and share. Please share with people if any of the episodes are ever impactful for you or you enjoy them. Please share them. It just would mean the world to us, and we're so appreciative that you even listen.
Yeah.
It's
truly.
Just crazy that there's even people who listen.
I know. Whether it's 200 or 20, we're
someone listened. Yes.
It's exciting.
It is exciting. So we're just appreciative.
Very good. All right. We love you guys, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.